Most people think retiring early is about luck. You either earn a lot, inherit something, or stumble into the right investment at the right time. And if none of those things happen, you just work until 65 and hope for the best. But that is not actually how retirement planning works. There are 4 specific variables that determine when you can retire and how comfortably you will live when you get there. And the most powerful thing about them is that you can have real influence over all 4 of these things. Now, the catch is that they do not work independently. So if you change one and it ripples through all the others, that can have a material impact. But most people have never seen them laid out together, which is why retirement planning can feel so overwhelming. You're trying to solve this big puzzle without knowing how many pieces there even are in the set. But today, we're gonna fix that. I'm Chelsea Ransom-Cooper, a certified financial planner and the Chief Financial Planning Officer here at Zenith Wealth Partners. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 4 core variables in retirement planning. I'll show you how they interact with each other and help you understand which ones give you the most leverage depending on where you are right now. And this is not personalized advice for your specific situation. If you like that, I'd be happy to schedule an intro call. But this is a framework that we use with every single client we work with. Now, I want to be upfront about something before we get into this. These 4 variables interact in ways that are specific to your income, your savings rate, your age, and your goals. The examples I'm going to use are illustrative. They're meant to show you how the math works, not tell you what your number is. So for that, you need a plan. That said, understanding these 4 dials is the foundation of every good retirement conversation I've ever had. So let's get into it. The first dial is spending needs. Your spending needs in retirement are the single most powerful dial you control. More powerful than your rate of return, more powerful than how much you have saved right now, because your spending needs determine your target number, and your target number determines almost everything else. So here's why this dial has so much leverage. If you reduce your expected retirement spending by, let's say, $10,000 a year, your target portfolio goes down by $250,000. That is based on the commonly used 4% withdrawal rate guideline, which suggests you need roughly 25 times your annual spending in savings to sustain withdrawals over a long retirement. That is a widely referenced rule of thumb. It's not a guarantee, and your actual number will depend on your specific situation. But the math is directionally clear. Spending less in retirement means you need less saved to get there, which means you could probably get there sooner. Most people have never actually mapped out what their retirement will cost. They have a vague sense that they just want to maintain their lifestyle, but they have never broken it down into categories or adjusted for what will change when they stop working, or even stress test it against different inflation numbers and healthcare costs. When we do this exercise with clients, the number almost always surprises them. Sometimes it is higher than they thought because of that healthcare and some travel they have planned, but sometimes it is lower because the mortgage will pay off, the kids are gone. Either way, knowing that really helps when it comes to planning. This is the dial most people ignore because it feels like a sacrifice, but it doesn't have to be. Spending clarity is not about cutting what brings you joy. It's about cutting what does not so you can fund what does. And that distinction matters a lot. Now let's talk about dial 2, your rate of return. Your rate of return is how much your investments grow over time. And I want to be honest with you about this one because it is the dial most people want to crank up. And it is also the dial that gets people in the most trouble. I want to say this, you cannot control what the market does. You can control how your portfolio is allocated, how much you pay in fees, and how you behave when the market drops. And those things have a real meaningful impact on your long-term outcome. But nobody can promise you a specific return, and anyone who does is not being straight with you. But here's the trap I see most often in this area. Someone who feels behind on savings decides, I need to chase higher returns. I need to be more aggressive to make up for the ground that I've been missing. So they take on more risks than their timeline or their temperament can handle, and then a bad year in the market hits right before their retirement, and they're actually in a worse position than if they had just stayed steady. When I work with clients, it's important for them to know that the last few years before retirement are especially sensitive to this because it's called a sequence of returns risk. So a significant market decline early in retirement or right before it can have a lasting impact on your portfolio's ability to sustain withdrawals for spending, even if the market recovers. This is one of the most important concepts in retirement planning and one of the least talked about in everyday financial content. The most useful thing you can do with this dial is not try to maximize it, but it is to make sure your portfolio allocation matches your timeline, your goals, and your actual risk tolerance. Not the risk tolerance you think you have when the market is up, the one you actually have when the market is down 20 to 25%. Dial 3 is your life expectancy. This is the dial nobody wants to talk about because it's uncomfortable, but planning for the wrong life expectancy is one of the most common and most costly mistakes in retirement planning. Here's the problem. Most people anchor on the average life expectancy when they plan. So the average American lives into their late 70s, so people maybe plan to age 80 or maybe even 85 if they want to feel cautious. But the averages are tricky. If you make it to 65 in reasonably good health, your life expectancy increases significantly from there. Many people underestimate their chances of living to their late 80s or even 90s. And here is something the 2026 Retirement Confidence Survey found that reinforces this. The median age workers expect to retire is 65, but the median age retirees actually stopped working can be closer to 62, so 3 years earlier than planned. And nearly half of retirees in that survey said they retired earlier than they expected, with 70% saying it happened for reasons outside of their control, mostly a health problem, a disability, or workplace changes like downsizing. So your plan cannot just work if everything goes right. It has to work if you stop working 3 years sooner than you intended to. A retirement that runs out of money at 85, but you live to 93 is not a successful retirement. This is a true crisis, and the people who end up there are almost always the ones who plan for a shorter timeline than they needed. Women especially need to pay attention to this dial. On the average, women live longer than men, which means a longer retirement to fund, higher lifetime healthcare costs, and a higher risk of outliving your spouse's income. So planning conservatively on life expectancy is not pessimistic, it's a great way to protect your assets. When I work with clients, I typically stress test plans to age 90 or 95, sometimes even 100, not because I think everyone will live that long, but because the cost of being wrong in that direction is much higher than the cost of being pleasantly surprised. A plan that can hold up at 95 gives you real confidence, but a plan that only works to 90 can keep you up at night. Next, let's talk about inflation. Inflation is that quiet dial. It does not make headlines the same way the stock market does, and it doesn't feel urgent the way a market crash does. But over 20 to 30 years of retirement, inflation can quietly erode a plan that looked successful when you first retired. Here's a simple way to think about it. If inflation averages around 3% a year over your retirement, the purchasing power of your money roughly cuts in half over 25 years. That means the $80,000 a year you are planning to spend at 65 needs to stretch to cover what feels like $160,000 worth of expenses by the time you're 90. Your income plan has to account for that, or you will feel the squeeze every year. Healthcare inflation is particularly important here because healthcare costs tend to rise faster than general inflation, and your healthcare spending tends to increase as you age. A plan that accounts for general inflation but does not account for healthcare inflation is probably underestimating your future costs. Social Security does include a cost of living adjustment each year, which helps, but it does not always keep up with the pace of healthcare inflation specifically. And if your other income sources are fixed, that gap is going to grow over time. This is why I always tell clients to build inflation assumptions directly into their retirement projections rather than just adjusting at the end. A plan built on today's dollar without real inflation assumptions is not a plan. It's just a snapshot of today. So how do these four dials interact? Here's what makes these four dials both challenging but also interesting at the same time. Since they don't operate in isolation, when you move one, the others will shift too. So if you decide to retire earlier, your life expectancy dial gets longer because your retirement spans more years. That increases the amount you need saved, which means your spending dial has to come down or your savings rate has to go up to compensate. And remember, nearly half of retirees did not choose their retirement date. It was chosen for them through a health issue, a layoff, or a company reorg. So your four dials have to be stress tested for that scenario too, not just the one where everything goes according to plan and you decide to retire on your own terms. If you chase a higher rate of return to close a savings gap, you take on more risk at exactly the time when the sequence of returns risk is highest, which could actually leave you in a worse position if the timing goes wrong. This is why retirement planning done well is not just a one variable problem, it is a system. And the people who retire with the most confidence are the ones who understand how these four pieces connect and have a plan that holds up when you stress test all of them together. So here's your takeaway. Retirement is not a lottery, right? It is not something that happens to you based on luck, or timing. It is shaped by 4 core variables that you have real influence over. So what you plan to spend, what your investments earn, how long you plan to live, and what inflation does to your purchasing power over time. The earlier you understand how those 4 interact, the more options you have. If you want to see how these 4 dials interact in your specific situation, that is exactly what we do every day at Zenith Wealth Partners. So click the link in the description to book a free intro call with our team. We will look at your actual numbers and show you where you have the most leverage right now. I promise, no guesswork, no generic benchmarks, just your 4 dials and a plan built around them. I'm Chelsea Ransom-Cooper. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next one. Cheers.